"You put your hands on my father." Simone said it softly. "I have learned in my life that the softest voices in the world are the ones you should fear the most." The big man at the door looked down at me. The torn coat, the gray stubble, the cardboard sign still resting against my knee. Then he looked back at her, at the diamonds on her wrist, at the black car still breathing exhaust behind her, and he laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was a confused one. "Ma'am," he said, "this man is homeless." Simone did not blink. "This man," she said, "drew every window you are standing under. He poured the stone beneath your feet. And in 30 minutes, he is going to own the ground you are standing on." I would like to tell you that I felt triumphant in that moment. I did not. I felt the side of my face where his open hand had landed, and I thought about how far a man can fall, and how strange it is that the bottom and the top can sometimes be the very same address. So let me take you back. Not 18 years, though that is where this story truly begins. Just 90 minutes. To the moment I decided, against every ounce of reason left in me, to come home. 90 minutes earlier, the sun was going down behind the meridian. I had not planned to come. I told myself that every year, and every year my feet carried me here anyway, on the same date, like a dog that still returns to a house that burned down long ago. It was the 9th of October. It was Naomi's birthday, and the meridian was the last place on earth where I could still feel her hand in mine. You should know a little about who I used to be so that the rest of this makes sense. Before the streets. Before the shelters that turned me away and the benches that did not. I was an architect, not a small one. My firm designed towers that people flew across the country to photograph. My name was on the glass door of a corner office. Vance and Hale. 2 names, side by side in brushed steel. Mine came first, though later I would learn how little that mattered. The meridian was my masterpiece. 42 floors of limestone and light in the middle of the city. When it opened, a magazine called it the most human skyscraper in America. I did not care about the magazine. I cared about the promise I had carved into its foundation with my own hands, the night before they poured the lobby floor. Naomi had come with me that night. She was already sick then, though we did not tell anyone yet. She stood in the empty concrete shell in her coat, her breath fogging in the cold, and she watched me kneel down by the eastern cornerstone with a chisel and a work light. "What are you writing?" she asked me. "A rule," I said, "for the building, so it never forgets what it is for." I carved 4 words into the stone, so no one is ever turned away. Then I set the cornerstone over it, and the words disappeared under a ton of granite, where no one would ever read them. Naomi thought I was strange. She also loved me for it, which is a rare and wonderful thing, to be loved for the strange parts. "Buildings are just walls, Isaiah," she said, taking my cold hands in hers. "It is the people you let inside them that matter." I did not understand what she meant that night. It would take me 18 years, a dead wife, a stolen company, and a slap in the face to finally understand it. So there I was, 90 minutes before the slap, standing across the street from the building I built, watching valets in red vests wave shining cars toward the entrance. There was an event that night, a big one, white lights strung along the awning, a velvet rope, a doorway crowded with people who smelled like money and did not have to think about the cold. The ground floor of the Meridian had become a private club. Onyx, the sign read, in thin gold letters. In my day, that space had been a public atrium with benches, where anyone could come in from the rain. Now it was a place with a list and a rope, and a very large man standing at the door to make sure the 2 sides of the rope never met. I told myself I would only look for a minute, just long enough to say happy birthday to a woman who could no longer hear me. Then I would go back to the underpass on Fremont Street where I kept my things, and I would let the building sleep without me for another year. But my feet, as always, had their own ideas. I crossed the street. The man at the door was named Dominic. I did not know that yet. What I saw was a wall of a person in a black jacket, arms folded, an earpiece curling down into his collar. He was not a bad man. I want you to hold on to that because it becomes important. He was a tired man with a difficult job, standing between the people who were allowed inside and the people who were not, on the coldest night of the autumn. Behind him, through the glass, I could see the lobby I had designed. My lobby. The floating staircase I had fought the engineers over for 6 months. The tall eastern windows that caught the last of the daylight and threw it across the stone. And somewhere under that stone, for words that no one alive but me remembered. I did not mean to go so close. I only wanted to see the staircase. But a man in a torn coat moving toward a velvet rope is a problem to be solved. And Dominic uncrossed his arms. Sir. His voice was flat, practiced. You cannot be here tonight. Private event. I know this building, I said. My own voice surprised me. I had not spoken to another person in 2 days, and it came out rough, like a door that needed oil. I helped build it. Something crossed his face. Pity, maybe. Impatience, definitely. He had heard 1,000 stories at that rope, and every one of them was a reason for him to break the rule, and the rule was the only thing keeping his paycheck alive. I hear you, he said, not unkindly, but you have to move along. There are guests coming. I should have gone. A wiser man, a colder man, would have turned and walked back to Fremont Street. But it was Naomi's birthday, and I was standing in the light of the thing we made together, and something in me that had been dead for years sat up and refused. Just let me see the lobby, I said. 1 minute. There is a stone in there. I put something under it. That was when the club manager came out. His name, I would learn, was Trent. He wore a suit that cost more than everything I had owned in a decade, and he had the particular anger of a small man given a small amount of power over other people's dignity. He took one look at me and his face folded in disgust, the way you might look at something dead in the road. What is this? He said to Dominic. He did not phrase it as a question. We have the Hale party arriving in 5 minutes, and you are having a conversation with this? The Hale party. The name went through me like cold water, though I said nothing. I filed it away and I would take it out again later, when it would break my heart a second time. I am handling it, Dominic said. You are not handling it. He is still standing here. Trent turned to me. Go. Now. Before I call someone who will make you go. And here is the part one am not proud of. I did not go. I looked past Trent at the staircase, at the windows going gold, and 18 years of grief and loss and being invisible rose up in me all at once, and I heard myself say the truest thing I had said in years. I am not leaving, I said quietly. This is mine. I built this, so no one would ever be turned away. And you are turning me away. Trent's face went white with fury. He did not hear a broken man saying something sacred. He heard a lunatic making a scene in front of arriving money. He stepped back and he said the words that started everything. Dominic, get him off my steps. What happened next happened fast, the way the worst things always do. Dominic put a hand on my shoulder to turn me. I flinched and pulled back, an old instinct from years of hands that grab and do not let go. My cardboard sign fell. I stumbled toward the rope. To Trent it looked like I had lunged. Now, Dominic, Trent barked. And Dominic, tired and pressured and afraid of losing the only job that fed his kids, did the thing he would regret for the rest of his life. He raised his open hand and he slapped me across the face. Hard. The sound of it cracked across the entrance like a snapped board. My head turned. My knees hit the cold stone steps of the building I had designed. I knelt there on the granite, tasting blood, my ears ringing, and I want to tell you what I thought about. I did not think about revenge. I thought about the words under the stone 6 feet away, on the other side of that glass. So no one is ever turned away. I had knelt to carve them 18 years ago. Now I was kneeling again, in the same lobby's shadow, turned away by the very promise I had made. I began to laugh, quiet and broken, and it frightened them more than screaming would have. That was the moment the black car pulled to the curb. Now I have to leave that cold stone for a little while, and I have to tell you about the 18 years between the promise and the slap. Because you cannot understand what happened next unless you understand how a man like me ended up on those steps in a torn coat. I will make it quick. Grief is not a story you should linger in. Naomi died the spring after the Meridian opened. The cancer that we had kept secret took her in 4 months, faster than any of the doctors expected. One day she was standing in an empty concrete shell telling me that buildings are just walls, and it felt like a week later I was standing at a graveside trying to explain to a 10-year-old girl why her mother was not coming home. That girl was my daughter. I am going to be careful about how I tell you about her, because there are wounds a father does not have the right to display. Her name was Simone. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and a small gap in her front teeth that she hated and I loved. After the funeral, our house on Aldridge Lane went very quiet. There was a drawing she had made taped to the refrigerator, the 3 of us as stick figures in front of a tall building. It stayed there for 2 years because neither of us could bear to take it down, and neither of us could bear to look at it. I did not handle the grief well. That is the honest and unglamorous truth of it. I want to give you a version where I was a hero and I cannot. I fell apart. I stopped sleeping. I stopped going to the office. I would sit in my car in the parking garage of the Meridian for hours because it was the last thing Naomi and I had built, and being inside it felt like being inside the last good year of my life. And while I was falling apart, my partner was watching. Preston Hale, the second name on the steel door. I met him in college. He was charming in the way that expensive people learn to be, all warmth on the surface and arithmetic underneath. For 20 years I thought he was my brother. He was in fact the most patient man I ever knew, and patience in a certain kind of person is just another word for waiting. Preston came to me 6 months after the funeral in the parking garage when I was at my lowest. He sat in the passenger seat of my car and he put a folder on my lap and he spoke to me in the gentlest voice you ever heard. "Isaiah," he said, "you are drowning. Anybody can see it. Let me carry the firm for a while. Just sign the operating control over to me, temporary, until you are back on your feet. Nobody has to know. It protects the company. It protects Simone's future." Simone's future. He knew exactly which word would move me. I was a broken man who could barely remember to eat, and he handed me a pen and told me it was for my daughter, and I signed. I did not read it. A man drowning does not read the label on the rope. It was not temporary. It was a transfer of controlling interest. Within a year, the door said Hale Group, and my name was gone from the steel. Within 2 years, I was locked out of my own office, my access badge deactivated, my calls sent to a voicemail nobody checked. When I finally hired a lawyer, the lawyer looked at what I had signed and shook his head and told me it would cost more than I had to even begin to fight it. And by then, I did not have much. Grief is expensive. So is being betrayed by the one man you trusted to tell you the truth. But Preston made one mistake, and it took me 18 years to learn what it was. He got the firm. He got the projects. He got the name on the door. But he did not get the Meridian, because the Meridian never belonged to the firm. Naomi had seen him clearly, long before I did. In the last month of her life, quietly, without telling me, she had moved the title of the Meridian into a family trust. Separate from the company. Untouchable. She told her attorney it was for the children, for the future, for a rainy day she could feel coming even though I refused to. When Preston stripped me of everything, he reached for the crown jewel and found it locked in a box he did not have the key to. He spent the next 18 years trying to buy that box. He never could. I did not know any of that on the steps. On the steps, all I knew was that I had lost my wife, my company, my house, and eventually, worst of all, my daughter. That is the part one am least able to forgive myself for. When Simone was 12, I disappeared from her life. I need you to hear me clearly, because I have spent 18 years hearing people make excuses for me, and I refuse to make them for myself. I chose to leave. Yes, Preston helped. He sat me down one last time and he told me, in that gentle, patient voice, that the best thing a broken man could do for his daughter was to get out of her way. He said she was thriving with her aunt. He said my face reminded her of everything she had lost. He said, and I remember every word, the kindest thing you will ever do for that girl is to let her grow up without watching you sink. And God help me, I believed him, because it was easier to believe him than to fight, because I had already decided I was worthless. And he simply agreed with me in a soothing tone. I left a note. I left the drawing from the refrigerator in an envelope. And I walked out into the years, and I did not come back. I told myself it was love. For a long time on the streets, that lie kept me warm. But there is a difference between protecting your child and abandoning her, and I had crossed that line and called it a gift. That is my weakness. Not the drinking, not the drifting, not the torn coat. My weakness was that I let a liar convince me my absence was a present, and I gave it to a child who never asked for it. So now you understand the man kneeling on the steps. A man who built a promise into a building, and then broke every promise he ever made to the two people he loved. A man who came back once a year on his wife's birthday to stand in the light of the one beautiful thing he had left behind. Now let me return to that cold stone and the black car at the curb, because this is where the story turns. The car door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was perhaps 28. She wore a deep green gown and a coat over it, and she moved the way people move when the room is expected to arrange itself around them. She was here for the event. She was, I would learn in about 90 seconds, the host of it, and she stopped on the sidewalk, one heel still in the car, because she had seen a man in a torn coat kneeling on the steps of her building with blood on his mouth, and a bouncer standing over him with a raised hand. "What is happening here?" she said. Not loud. That soft, dangerous quiet. Trent hurried toward her, all smiles now, a completely different man. "Miss Vance. So sorry. Just a vagrant. We are removing him now. Please, the party is inside." Vance. I heard it and I did not dare to look up. Vance is not a rare name. I told myself it was not a rare name. I stayed on my knees with my head down and I began, without meaning to do the thing I always do when I am afraid. I hummed. A low, tuneless little melody, the one Naomi used to hum at the kitchen sink with her hands in the dishwater. The one I had hummed to a frightened girl in the back seat of a car 18 years ago to get her to sleep. The woman went completely still. I did not know it then, but I have pieced it together since, from what she told me later. That melody stopped her heart, because she knew it. She had not heard it in 18 years, but a child does not forget the song her father hummed to her in the dark. She had spent a fortune and a decade of her life looking for the man who used to hum it. And here it was, rising up off the cold steps of the building he built, from the mouth of a man that her own staff had just struck to the ground. She let go of the car door. She walked past Trent as though he were furniture. She crossed the steps and she knelt down, in her green gown on the granite, until her face was level with mine. "Sir," she said, and her voice was shaking now, all the danger gone out of it, replaced with something far more terrifying, which was hope. "Sir, look at me. Please." I looked up. "I will not be able to make you feel what I felt. There are no words that are big enough." I was looking at Naomi, the same eyes, the same stubborn chin, and when her lips parted, the small gap in her front teeth that she had hated and I had loved. "Simone," I said, came out as barely anything at all. Her hand flew to her mouth, and then to the locket at her throat, which I would later see held a photograph of the three of us, taken the day the Meridian opened, the last good day. Tears were running down her face and she was not wiping them away. "Dad," she said. "Daddy, I have been looking for you for 10 years. Behind us, Trent was still talking, still saying something about the party, about the schedule, about the vagrant, until Simone stood up and turned around and looked at him, and he stopped talking as though someone had unplugged him. "You struck this man," she said. She was not looking at Trent anymore. She was looking at Dominic, who had gone gray, who had lowered his hand as though it belonged to someone else. "You put your hands on my father, That is where this story began 90 minutes ago at the top. Now you know how we got there. Ma'am, Dominic said, and his voice cracked. This man is homeless. He was refusing to leave. I did not know. This man, Simone said, drew every window you are standing under. He poured the stone beneath your feet. She turned and helped me up. My knees screamed. My face was already swelling. And she looked around the entrance, at Trent, at Dominic, at the velvet rope and the beautiful glass doors of the Meridian, and she said the thing that gives this story its name. Get everyone inside, she said. The party is over, and somebody call Eleanor Shaw. Tell her to bring the documents down to the lobby now. I did not understand. Simone, what documents? I said. She took my ruined hand in both of hers, exactly the way her mother had taken my cold hands in an empty concrete shell 18 years before. You are going to understand everything in a minute, she said. But first I need you to come inside your building. Inside the building. She said it as though it were the most natural thing in the world. We went through the glass doors. Dominic held them open and would not meet my eyes, and I did not have room in me yet to think about him. The lobby opened up around us, and I stopped walking, because it was mine. They had changed the furniture and hung new lights, but the floating staircase still climbed the air the way I had fought for, and the tall eastern windows still stood watch, dark now, holding the city lights. 18 years I had looked at this room from across the street. I had forgotten how it felt to be held inside it. And there, near the base of the staircase, was the cornerstone. The eastern cornerstone, the one I had knelt beside with a chisel, except it was not sealed anymore. During the restoration, Simone told me later, a mason had found the seam, and behind it, a hollow, and inside the hollow, for words carved into stone by a hand nobody could identify. So no one is ever turned away. Simone had stood over that inscription 2 years ago and wept without understanding why. She had left it exposed, behind a small pane of glass, a mystery at the heart of her building. Now she led me to it and she pointed and she looked at me and she did not need to ask the question. I carved that, I said, the night before we poured the floor. Your mother watched me do it. Simone put her hand flat against the glass over the words. I know, she whispered. I have known you were connected to this place for years. I just could not find the man. She turned to me. Dad, I have spent 10 years and more money than I want to admit trying to find you. Do you know why I never sold this building? Preston Hale has tried to buy the Meridian from the trust 11 times. 11. He has offered numbers that would make you dizzy. I turned him down every single time. Do you know why? I shook my head. My throat had closed. Because it was yours, she said. Because I promised myself that if I ever found you, I would put the deed back in your hands. That is what the trust was always for. Mom set it up so nobody could ever take it from us. Eleanor is on her way down right now with the transfer documents I had drawn up 2 years ago. They have been sitting in a drawer, signed by me, waiting for a father I could not find. All they need is you. I want to describe to you what it is to be a man who has spent 18 years believing he deserved nothing, being handed everything by the child he abandoned. It does not feel like winning. It feels like drowning in the opposite direction. I sat down on the bottom step of my own staircase and I put my head in my hands and I wept in a way I had not allowed myself since the graveside. And that is when the elevator opened and Preston Hale walked into the lobby. He was older now. Silver hair, expensive and careful. He had come down looking for the host of a party that had suddenly ended. Annoyed, checking his watch. He saw Simone. He saw the exposed cornerstone. And then he saw me, sitting on the steps in a torn coat with blood on my mouth, and I watched 18 years of arithmetic collapse behind his eyes. Isaiah, he said. He tried to smile. The charm reached for its old tools and found them rusted. My God, is that you? We all thought you had. We did not know if you were even still. This is a miracle. Look at you. Do not, Simone said. Preston kept his eyes on me, ignoring her, working fast. Isaiah, listen to me, whatever you have been told, whatever this is, we should talk privately, you and I, the way we always did. You look like you have had a hard road. Let me help you. Let me get you cleaned up. A hotel, a hot meal. We can sort all of this out like the old friends we are. And here is where you might expect me to rise up and destroy him. To scream. To swing. I have replayed this moment 1,000 times, and I need you to understand why I did not. I stood up. My knees hurt. My face throbbed. I looked at the man who had waited by my drowning and handed me a pen, who had told me my absence was a gift to my child, who had spent 18 years trying to pry the last beautiful thing out of my dead wife's careful hands. And I felt the anger, all of it, a river of it, enough to drown us both. But I also felt Naomi in the room, and I heard her voice from that cold night. Buildings are just walls. It is the people you let inside them that matter. You told me leaving her was love, I said. My voice was quiet and it did not shake. You told me a broken man's absence was the kindest thing he could give his daughter. You said it in that gentle voice, Preston, the one you use right before you take something. I believed you. I gave away 18 years of her life because you told me it was a gift. I looked at Simone and back at him. You did not just steal my company. You stole me from my own child, and you did it while pretending to comfort me. The lobby was very quiet. The charm had fully drained out of Preston's face now. What was underneath was smaller and colder and, for the first time in 20 years, afraid. You cannot prove any of that, he said, which is the thing that guilty men say instead of denying it. He does not have to, said a new voice. Eleanor Shaw had arrived. She was the trust's attorney, a woman of about 55 with silver reading glasses and a leather folder under her arm, and she had clearly heard the last part. She set the folder on the reception desk and she looked at Preston Hale the way a surgeon looks at a growth. Mr. Hale, she said pleasantly, I have been the attorney for the Vance Family Trust for 19 years. In that time I have quietly kept a file. Every offer you made for this building. Every time you tried to have the trust dissolved. And a very interesting document from 18 years ago. The operating control transfer that Mr. Vance signed in a parking garage while, by 3 separate witness accounts, he was in no condition to understand it. There are laws about that, Mr. Hale. Undue influence. Fraud in the inducement. You have spent 18 years assuming that a broken man would never come back to sign a complaint. She smiled without any warmth at all. He is standing right here. I watched Preston Hale understand that the arithmetic had finally, after 18 years, turned against him. I could have let Eleanor take him apart. I had the right to, but I want to tell you what I chose because the choosing is the whole point of this story. I am not going to spend the years I have left in a courtroom hating you, I said to Preston. I have spent enough of my life hating myself, and there is not much of me left to burn. Eleanor will file what needs to be filed. The lawyers will do what lawyers do. You will answer for how you took the firm, and I suspect you will lose a great deal, and that will be justice, not revenge. But I am not going to stand in this lobby and let you have one more minute of my daughter's night. I turned my back on him. It is the most powerful thing I have ever done. I turned my back on Preston Hale and I walked towards Simone, and I left him standing in the light of the building he could never buy, holding nothing. Security walked him out. Not roughly, just finally. Eleanor opened the leather folder on the reception desk. Inside were the transfer documents, drawn up 2 years earlier, signed already by Simone as administrator of the trust. A deed. Conveyance. All that remained was one signature, on a line that had waited 2 years for a man who could not be found. Whenever you are ready, Mr. Vance, Eleanor said gently, and she held out a pen. I looked at the pen. The last time a man had handed me a pen in a moment of weakness, I had lost everything. I understood, standing there, that this was Naomi answering that betrayal across 18 years. She had built a lock that only love could open, and she had trusted our daughter to carry the key until I came home. I signed my name. Isaiah Vance. On the deed to the Meridian. I looked at the clock on the lobby wall. It had been slightly less than 30 minutes since Dominic's hand had knocked me to the granite outside. 30 minutes from the bottom of my life to the top in the same building at the same address. There was one more thing to do. I want to tell you about it because it is the part one am most proud of, more than the deed, more than turning my back on Preston. I asked Simone to bring Dominic inside. He came in slowly, hat in his hands, a big frightened man who fully expected to be destroyed. He had struck the new owner of the building. He had struck the father of his employer. His job was gone, and I could see he already knew it, and I could see something worse underneath, which was that he knew he had done a shameful thing to a helpless man, and that knowledge is its own kind of homelessness. I do not have any excuse, he said before I could speak. I have played it back 100 times in the last 20 minutes. There is no version where I come out okay. I have 2 kids. Trent had been on me all week about keeping the door clean for the Hale party. I was scared for my job, and I took it out on you. I am not asking you to forgive me. I just wanted to say it to your face. I looked at him for a long time, and I thought about all the hands that had grabbed me over 18 years. The shelter workers who turned me away when the beds ran out. The officers who moved me along. The good people who crossed the street. I thought about how easy it is, when you are scared and tired and someone with a suit is standing over you, to raise your hand at the person below you instead of the person above you. Do you know why Trent wanted the door kept clean? I asked him. Because a man who was drowning 18 years ago carved a promise into the stone under your feet, that no one would ever be turned away from this building, and every year since, the people who run this place have made money by breaking that promise. You are the hand at the end of that arm, Dominic. But you are not the arm. He did not know what to say to that. Neither did I, fully. You are not fired, I said. Simone looked at me sharply. But you are not going to stand at that rope anymore either, deciding who is worthy of coming in from the cold. I have a different job in mind. If you want it. Because I already knew what the Meridian was going to become. That was 2 years ago. Let me tell you where things stand now, because I do not want to leave you on the steps. Preston Hale did not go to prison. White-collar arithmetic rarely ends that cleanly. But Eleanor Shaw filed everything, and the civil case unwound 18 years of what he had built. He lost the Hale Group. He lost the name on the door. He settled rather than let the fraud go to trial in front of a jury, and the settlement returned to the trust a great deal of what he had taken. The last I heard, he had moved to another state. I do not spend my nights thinking about him. That is its own kind of freedom, and I earned it the hard way. The Meridian is still standing, of course. But the ground floor is not a private club anymore. Onyx is gone. Where the velvet rope used to be, there is a public atrium again with warm benches and long tables, and above the doors in brushed steel letters it says the Naomi Vance Center. On the coldest nights of the year, no one who comes to those doors is turned away. There are showers and hot food and case workers and a wall of resources for people trying to climb back up out of the years the way I could not, alone for so long. Dominic runs the door, not to keep people out, to welcome them in, and to remember their names, and to make sure the promise carved into the stone is finally, after all these years, kept. He is very good at it. It turns out the same size that made him frightening at a velvet rope makes him gentle and reassuring at a shelter door. His kids come by sometimes. They think the building belongs to their father a little, and I let them think it. And Simone, my Simone, we do not have a perfect ending, and I would not trust it if we did. 18 years is not erased by one night on the steps. There were hard conversations. There was an evening, about a month after all of this, when she finally let herself be angry at me instead of only grateful, and she said, through tears, "You left. I was 12, and you decided I was better off, and you did not even ask me." And she was right. I did not defend myself. I did not blame Preston, though he was to blame. I said, "You are right. I let a liar tell me my absence was a gift, and I gave it to you, and you never asked for it. I am sorry. I will spend whatever I have left earning back the minutes. And she let me start. We have dinner every Sunday now. She still has the drawing from the old refrigerator, framed in her office. 3 stick figures in front of a tall building. I look at it sometimes and I think about the strange, terrible, redemptive shape of a life, that the tall building in a child's drawing could be the same building where, decades later, she would kneel in a green gown and call a broken man daddy. So that is the story of the night a bouncer slapped a homeless man outside a club, and 30 minutes later that man owned the building. But I do not want you to remember it as a story about a slap, or about a deed, or even about revenge that never came. I want you to remember what Naomi said in an empty concrete shell, before either of us knew what was coming. Buildings are just walls. It is the people you let inside them that matter. I built the most human skyscraper in America, and then I spent 18 years learning that a building means nothing if you turn away the very people it was built to shelter. I carved a promise into stone and then let the world break it over and over against people like the man I became. The tragedy of my life was not the streets. It was that I forgot my own promise. And the grace of my life was a wife who saw the future clearly, and a daughter who refused to sell the past, and a chance, in the end, to keep the promise myself. We spend so much of our lives sorting people into those who belong inside and those who do not. The man in the torn coat on the steps. The stranger asking for change. The person we decide, in a glance, is not worth the minute it would cost us to see them. And every single one of them is somebody's father. Somebody's Naomi. Somebody who carved a promise once and lost their way. So here is my question for you, and I truly want you to answer it in the comments because I read them. Have you ever turned someone away at a door, in your life, a real door or a door in your heart, and only understood later who they really were? And if you could go back and open it, would you? I am at my door now. It stays open. And no one is ever turned away.